Hello and welcome to episode 56 of my podcast all about knitting and crochet in my yarn shop here in Wiesbaden, Germany. I'm Kiko and today is June 22nd, 2020. Today I'm wearing a triangular shawl. You could probably call it a hap shawl because it's quite big. And in German, I call the project Kuschel-Halloween-Dreieckstuch, which means Kuschel means like cuddle, and that's because it's so soft and cuddly warm. And Halloween because the colorway of one of the yarns I used was called Halloween, and then triangular shawl. And I used one ball of yarn by 100 Farbspiele. That's translated means 100 color, or a play with 100 colors. And these balls of yarns have they're gradient balls. And this one had a very dark blue on one end, and the other end and went through a lilac color and then to a lighter blue color. And I held it double with a blue mohair silk yarn. So the gradient is a bit less obvious because the mohair yarn is the same throughout. But it's still visible, and especially if you hold the two ends together, it's very obvious how different the colors are. And the pattern is a German free pattern on Ravelry, and it's called Musterschlacht. And Muster means pattern, and Nixe it was a misspelling. She meant to write a mix of patterns, and then she misspelled it, and then she left the mistake in just for fun. And the pattern works, and I didn't follow the pattern, didn't really follow it at all. I just took the idea from the pattern, and the idea is that you start with one pattern, and every time there is a color change in the gradient, you change the pattern. And I think the original also starts with garter stitch and then goes into a seat stitch. And I think then the patterns in the pattern are different from the ones that I used. So I went from a seat stitch to a 2x2 rib that I offset every other row. And then I went into a 3x3 rib with 2 rows of garter in between. And then I went to a 4x4 rib, so you see the pattern there. And I put some holes in there, so just a tiny bit of lace. And then with the 5x5, I didn't really do a rib. I did these triangles. So these were 5 knit stitches and 1 purl stitch, and then I changed them until it was 5 purl stitches and 1 knit stitch. So that was quite fun. And then instead of going to a 6x6 pattern, I did do a 6x6 pattern, did I? It's difficult to see. Yeah. So these are also triangles, but in a different direction. But then I went down to I'm not quite sure what it's called. It's knit 2, purl 2, and then the next row you knit the stitches as they appear, and then you turn it around. Instead of knit 2, purl 2, you do purl 2, knit 2, and then the row back you knit the stitches the way they appear. And then I did normal seat stitch, and I finished off the last color with a garter edge again. Yeah, so it's a mix of many patterns. They're all, except for the little bit of lace, these are just stitches made with knits and purls, so nothing really difficult. But and what I did is I increased the stitches on one side, and the other side just goes straight. Yeah, so that's what it looks like if you look at the whole thing. So this is the straight edge, and this is the edge with the increases. And I'm really, really happy with it. It's almost a bit too warm for now, but I thought it goes well with this pullover. And the pullover is I call the project Noro Sommerpulli, which means summer jumper, and it's knit out of Noro Sekku, and that's a lace weight yarn by Noro. I'm not quite sure what the content is. I think it's a mix of cotton and wool and probably a bit of silk and I don't know what. And I had one ball of yarn. It's rather short, and the pattern I knit is called Jujuba by Nora Gaunt, and you'll find links to all the projects I talk about underneath the video, and there I link to the original patterns. And again, I didn't knit it quite as specified. In the pattern, what you do is you knit the sleeves, then you increase your stitches for the fronts and backs, then you split for the neck, and then you knit both pieces to the middle, and then in the middle of the front and the back, she does a 3-needle bind off from the outside. So you have a line going down the center, front and back, and I think it looks quite nice if you have a single color yarn, and then it's a nice accent, and it makes the pullover a little bit more special. But because I'm using this multicolor yarn with the many colors and it already has stripes, I didn't want this line going down the middle. So what I did, I started with the sleeves as it says in the pattern. I increased the stitches and then I knit to the neckline, and then what I did is one piece I knit the front and the other piece I knit the back, and then I did a Kitchener stitch either here or here, and then on the other side as well. I can't remember where I did the seam because as it's a Kitchener stitch seam, you can't really tell, which is why you do a Kitchener stitch. Yeah, so I'll show you the pullover because the shawl's just too warm for right now. Okay, then on to my finished objects. I finished my pair of socks. So this was a German mystery knit along. The pattern is called Zack-Zick socks, which is a wordplay on zick-zack, which means those lines going back and forth. That's what you call zick-zack in German. And yeah, and I finished them. The yarn is Opal Abo yarn, subscription yarn. So it was one of those balls that I didn't know what color they would have. And yeah, I think you can still see the pattern, even though it's not a single color. And it has this different heel that I still don't know what to call in English. But yeah, they were nice to knit. I like the pattern and they fit me, so I wasn't quite sure what size to make, and I somehow got it wrong when I tried them on and to decide when to start the toe, and I thought they'd be too big for me and then I would have given them away, but now they ended up fitting me perfectly, so I decided to keep them because I really like the color and I like the pattern. That's the only finished project for this week. Now on to works in progress, and I'll start with my socks as usual. So this is my spiral sock. Didn't knit a lot on it. This marks where I finished 10 repeats of the 4 rows, knit 3, purl 3, and I did 30 repeats on the first sock, so that's about 1/3 of the sock. And I'll just have to keep knitting, and yeah, as I said, after I finished the first one, I'm not too not too eager is maybe the wrong word. I still want to finish the second one, but it's not quite as urgent, so I'll just keep knitting on it on and off, and that's okay. But as it was the only sock that I had on the needles, I wanted to start another one. Oh, and I just realized it's the same line of opal yarn. So it's Fairytale is what it's called. And this is the color Knusperhaus. And this is the color Zaubertrank, which means magic potion. So I've always wanted to knit something with this color, and now I've started another sock. I'm knitting again with the chiaogoo mini circular needles, and this is a pattern that I learned years and years ago from a customer in the shop where I used to work, and I think it looks really funny and it's very simple to do. I'll write it on my pattern page, so if you want to know how it works, I'll try and remember to write it down in English and in German, but it's really simple but also very effective. So yeah, and I've meant to knit this pattern again for a long time, and now was the right time, and that's what I did. And sometimes that happens, I start something new and I feel like starting more new things. So last week I actually started 3 new projects. So that was not the first one, but it's actually the last one. I started that yesterday, and the day before, was it the day before? Or maybe on Friday, I started a cowl. And this is another Opal Abo subscription yarn. And I've probably told you before, but if you have this subscription from Opal, you get a parcel 4 times a year. So it's not really every 3 months, but 4 times a year you get this package with 6 balls of yarns, and you don't know what the color looks like. And then in the German Opal Abo group on Ravelry, there's someone who picks out 3 of those colors from every parcel, and then she lets people vote, and then the winner ball of yarn is used for the so-called Musterschlacht, so the fight of the patterns. And for the last parcel, it was this color that was chosen, and everyone who wants to participate in this battle can pick a pattern, and as long as that pattern has not been chosen before, you can take part with that pattern. So I was really late in choosing a pattern, but most people knit socks with this. So I try, if possible, to not knit socks. And I know last week I said I had several sock patterns in mind that I want to use, but then I decided I'm going to knit a Haruni cowl. So the Haruni shawl is the knit along that I'm doing with my Ravelry group and my videos. But now I went and bought the Haruni collection. It's a 5 pattern collection, and one of the patterns is a cowl that uses the same pattern, same lace pattern that the shawl uses. So this is the beginning of my Haruni cowl, and it's going to be this way. So it has a little garter edge, and then I start with chart A. It's the same lace pattern. You can almost see this sleeve's not quite finished yet. I haven't quite finished the first pattern repeat, but I'll repeat this pattern, and then there'll be chart B and C, just as with the shawl, and then these big leaves that on the end of the cowl, they will like sit around like this, and then I'll have the rest of the cowl closer to my neck. Yeah, I chose the bigger size. The cowl comes in 2 sizes, and so this won't be too tight, but rather loose. I'm not quite sure how big I'm going to make it, but I want to make sure I can finish it with this one ball, because with this I actually only have this one ball. That's what I'm trying to say. Okay, and the third new project that I cast on last week is a crochet project, and that has to do with opal minis. So Opal makes these mini balls of yarn. They're 10 grams, about 42 meters, and I regularly buy them in a bigger package, and I sell them in my shop. And after selling quite a few of those, I realized that I had several balls left with a lot of green in them. So I do know quite a few people who like green, but either they don't like the minis or whatever. Maybe I just got too many balls that had green. So I decided I'll make something with them. And I had already crocheted one square a while ago, don't remember, probably several months ago. I just wanted to know how far you get if you use 10 grams of opal sock yarn and you just crochet a very simple granny square. So this is just a very simple granny square crocheted out of a 10 gram mini, and this is what I had left. So obviously this wouldn't have been enough for another round, and I managed to crochet 9 rounds, and I thought that's a nice size. And if I do more of those, I can maybe someday do a blanket, or maybe a cushion cover, or I could even do a jumper or a jacket or a skirt. I've seen several skirts made of squares that look nice. But anyway, so I did that. I put it to the side and then forgot about it. And then last week, I think it was Thursday, I was itching to start something new, and I couldn't make up my mind what kind of sock to knit. And I hadn't bought the Haruni pattern yet. So suddenly I saw this square and I thought, well, I'll make more of those squares, and I'll make a little baby blanket with green as the main color, and then lots of other colors in between. So I grabbed 2 of the minis and my crochet hook, and my favorite crochet hook is a 4mm needle, and I often use the 4mm needle to crochet with sock yarn. So I crochet 2 of the little balls into squares, and this is one of them. This is the second one, and it wasn't enough to do 9 rounds. So if you have a look, this is where I started the round, and this is where I finished. So it was a little more than one side that was missing. So the first square I crocheted, I thought, well, they're not the same exactly, so maybe it's just this ball is a little smaller and the other one was a bit bigger. But then I did another one and I had the same problem. And so I took another ball, and that was this one, and I crocheted with a 3.5mm needle. And I thought maybe that's what I used for the other one. And if it's enough to finish the 9 rounds, then that shows me that I crocheted with a 3.5 needle, because the size was almost the same. The first square I did with the 4mm needle was almost exactly the same size as the first one, but the second one was a bit bigger. So this one is now exactly, it's almost a tiny bit smaller than the first one. But I know they're never exactly the same size, even if you do exactly the same thing with the same needle and the same stitch and everything. But that doesn't matter, because that'll block out once they're attached. So then what I did is yesterday I undid the first square that I crocheted with a 4mm needle, and I crocheted it again with a 3.5mm needle, and it was still not enough. So I guess this is probably the difference in the sizes of the little balls. I really like the colors in this one, but it's not more than one side. It's only 1, 2, 3. It's 3 groups of double crochets that I couldn't do with this ball. And then with this, I only had this much left. And with this, I had this much left. So that's quite interesting and funny. And I guess that this yarn is probably enough to do those 3 groups here. So that's what I might do. I might just use this yarn to finish this side, and then I'll have another full square. So this one I will undo and crochet again. And then I'll have 4 different squares, and I have those 2 minis with green in them, and I have several other minis with green in them. But then I thought I'll probably also use other opal yarn that has green in the color mix, and if I have leftovers of 10 grams, I can make squares out of these. And then I'm thinking of using a single color green to attach them. So I'll probably crochet another round and then crochet them together as I go. That's the plan, but I'm not quite sure how many squares to do. 9 is definitely too small. Even 16 is probably not really big enough to have a proper blanket. So right now I'm thinking I might have to do 25. So it's 5 times 5. But we'll see. I'll just keep crocheting for a while and see what happens. So these are all my new cast-ons that I did last week. Now on to the older projects that you already know, and I'll show you how far I got with them. So this is the haramaki that I'm knitting on the bias, and I did the first contrast color, and I'm now continuing with the main color, and the plan is to finish off the main color and then find a second contrast color so I can finish the cowl, because it won't be big enough just with the main color. So as you can see, this is the width that I would get if I just use this color, and that's too small for a hat, for a normal hat. And for a child's hat, it'd be way too long. Yeah, so I'll just have to keep knitting on that. And I just realized when I thought about my projects before I started filming that because I finished off the whole contrast color and I'm going to finish off the whole of the main color, there'll be no leftovers for my blanket. But that's the way things are. I don't want to make the loop smaller, the haramaki smaller, just to have a square for my blanket. I have enough leftovers for my blanket, so that's okay. Yeah, talking about which, I actually knit the 3 squares that I had planned. Let me think. These are the 3 that I knit last week. Last week I showed you these 3, and then I added this Wolldackel yarn that I used to knit a small shawl. Then this is actually leftover yarn from the socks that I only just finished. And that's basically how I wanted to knit the blanket. I wanted to finish a project and put a square in. But I still have a bag full of yarn that I've from projects that I finished, and I never got around to putting them in the blanket. So I will keep trying to put several squares in as often as I can until the bag's empty and I can actually go from finishing a project, putting it into the blanket. And then the third one is this one. This is another opal yarn with cotton, as is this. So I thought it was quite funny to have the 2 cotton yarns next to each other. And the other reason I used this yarn straight away is I just didn't have another color that fit with the colors around it. And but the gray is very neutral, and because of the green, it really goes with the ones around it. And that's a problem. If I put a square in every time I finish the project, I can't really choose how the colors come together. So the advantage of waiting is that I can place colors so I think they look nice. On the other hand, if I really just put them any which way because I'd finished a project, it would probably look good too, even if 2 colors looked a bit funny, just the way they look next to each other. Once the blanket is done and they're all there, it probably wouldn't be a problem, I guess. And talking about squares, I crocheted my Carnaby crochet long squares out of cotton. Last week I showed you those squares crocheted out of wool, and these are these the right ones? No, I think it was these 2. Yeah, I showed you these before. I'm getting mixed up. Yeah, so they go really well with my pullover, don't they? Maybe I should make a jacket out of these squares, and I could wear it on top of this pullover. We'll see. Still can't make up my mind. Anyway, these are the 2 new motifs, and again there's 2 colors missing, and it's the white and it's the multicolor yarn that's missing. So those colors are in here, but these 2 don't have the, is it lilac? Purple, I think purple is the word. Yeah, so now I have 6 small cotton motifs. I have 2 bigger ones, and I have the very big one. That was the first one and now I have to wait for July and the next Simply Crochet magazine. Okay, and what's next? The next project, same color family, is my Känguruh Hose by Stephen West, my trousers. And last week I had almost finished the second blue strip on the outside of the trousers, and as you can see, they are both done. And I have started this strip that attaches the front and back in the middle of the trousers. Yeah, so this is slowly growing and I'm very happy, and I know it's way too warm right now to wear it, but I still enjoy knitting on it. Now on to my pullovers and my jacket. And I did not knit on my Hitofude last week. And the reason is I simply forgot. It's usually here in my shop so people can have a look at it. And the last couple of weeks I always took it home on Friday so I could work on it during the weekend at home. And I just simply forgot to take it home. And because I had so many other things to do at home, I didn't even miss it. And when I organized my stuff this morning, I realized I hadn't knit a stitch on it. So I won't show you today, but I'll make sure I work on it the coming 2 weeks, and then I can show you how far I got. But I have knit on my snowflake pullover, and that's another opal subscription yarn. And as I said, usually you only have one ball of yarn in your color, but because several people swapped with me and one even just gifted me her blue ball of yarn, I now have enough yarn to knit this pullover and probably also knit a skirt. And I'd already put the sleeve stitches on waist yarn, and I was knitting on the front and back, and I finally managed to finish the first ball of yarn. So that's the first ball of yarn. And I tried it on several times. I'm really, really happy with how it's coming along. And I have knit 2 rounds of decreases. It was really wide and I didn't want it quite as wide. So I did 2 rounds of decreases. I'm very happy with the number of stitches I have now. I'm now going to do the sleeves. But when I come back to the front and back, I will probably have to do a few increases again so it fits on my hips, and then I'll have to measure when to start adding in the pattern again. I don't want it too long, especially if I do a skirt as well, so I'll have to measure how many centimeters this pattern will be and where I want the ribbing to be and so on. I almost got down to my waist. It's just a little bit more and then it hits my waist. And then I have to make sure I do the increases because I'm not very tall, there's not much space between my waist and my hips. And I don't want to do increases while I do the pattern, so it'll have to be quick somehow. I'll see. So that's that. And then the last project I'm showing you is my Haruni shawl. So as I said, it's the same pattern as the cowl that I've started, and I finally put in a little longer cable needle, so it's a bit easier to see now. So this is all chart A. That's the pattern that I'm working on the cowl at the moment. I know the yarn is very colorful, so the pattern is not that obvious, but I think it's okay and I don't mind. And I found beads to put in, and that's the beads that I'm using. They're by Rico, and this is what it looks like. I think you can see the beads there. It's not very obvious, and I know I chose beads that have about the same color as the yarn that I'm using, but because the yarn has so many different colors, sometimes a red bead will sit on a piece of blue yarn or on a bit of yellow yarn. So I think the visibility will be different in different parts of the shawl. I knit 3 pattern rows of chart B, so that's 6 rows in total. And the way I place the beads is, as I said, it's I've seen that in several projects on Ravelry, but it's also in the pattern collection, the Haruni pattern collection. There are several patterns with beads, and they have the beads in the same places. So I looked there, and it's like the stem of the leaf. So the beads all sit on top of each other and they form lines. And so even though the beads themselves are fairly small and they have kind of the same colors as the yarn, I think because they're sitting on top of each other, they'll still be rather visible. Then chart C will be without beads. And then on the edge, when I cast off and I do the chains, I want to put beads in there, and I may use these ones. They're basically the same color, but they're bigger. And I'll have to count whether I have enough beads for all the chains that I need to do for casting off. But if they fit, I'll put those on the very edge of the shawl, and that should look fun. And if they're not enough beads there, I can see if I can buy them. Otherwise, I'll maybe just use the small ones, and I have a lot of these, so maybe I can put like 3 beads in every chain instead of just 1 bead. We'll see. There's still quite a bit of work to do before I get there, so I'll have time to think about that and check the shops and see if I can still get the beads. And this is all I have left over from my first ball of yarn, but I already have number 2 waiting. So this is the Opal 3-ply, which is thinner than the normal sock yarn, and I think it's perfect for a lightweight lace shawl. Yeah, so that's all the projects I worked on, everything I knit and crocheted last week. Next week there won't be an episode because I'll be traveling. There will be a video on my German channel where I show all my very old whips. So if you're interested in that, you can have a look there and see quite a few things that I've started during the last, I think, 9 or 10 years, and that I haven't finished for whatever reason. I hope to finish those things one after the other during the coming years probably. So once I do work on them, I will also show them here on the English channel, but I didn't have time to do an English version of that video last week, so it'll only be there on the German channel. But as I said, I hope they will appear here as well, because I will be knitting on them and finishing them at some point. Okay, I hope you enjoyed seeing my projects grow and all the new things I started, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!